Hey guys, I'm Rob and welcome back to Rob's Model Cars. Well, today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to replicate forged carbon. Now, forged carbon was pretty much introduced by Lamborghini on the Huracan Performante, and most of the aero parts were in forged carbon. So what I've got here is a MR Collection resin model of the Huracan Performante Spider. And as you can see, it had a forged carbon front lip and rear diffuser was all in forged carbon, as well as the rear wing. Now, one thing, this is obviously a decal that's been clear coated or a decal, but to me doesn't really look like forged carbon. Now, I had an Auto Art Performante Coupe, and it was the same thing on the Auto Art model. The forged carbon didn't really look like forged carbon. It was a pretty good effort for a decal, but I just don't think it was close enough to look like the real forged carbon. Now, I've already had a play around with this on another custom model that I made, and this was a Alpha Model kit. Alpha Model is part of the Hobby Design group, and they make a sealed resin version of the Huracan Performante, which you have here, but I've slightly modified this one to make it into a Novitec version. Now, as you can see here, this has some forged carbon winglets on the side here. The side skirts are all in forged carbon. Rear diffuser, I have done my own version of forged carbon, and the rear wing as well. So not sure how well the camera's picking that up. It's a lot more subtle, and it's a bit sort of finer and a bit more realistic to forged carbon. Well, that's my take on it anyway. I've also done these Novitec scoops on the side of the engine. Not sure how well you can see it because of the gloss level, but I'm going to show you how to, using paint, how to do your own version of forged carbon. So let's get started with the materials that you need. So basically what you want to do is paint your parts in a matte black or a flat black. That's what I start with. And for the carbon effect, initially I'm going to use this Tamiya XF66 light grey colour. That's all you need as far as paint colour goes. And I'm going to use a brush. Now, this brush I've actually splayed out all the ends and ruffled all the bristles up. So it's a really random pattern. And that just started out as a short, flat bristle Tamiya paintbrush, as you can see here. So this paintbrush became this paintbrush. So this is the paintbrush that I'm going to use. Now, there may be other methods to do this, but this is the method that I found works pretty good and is a little bit more realistic than the decal version on these other models. Now, I've already done a little pre-sample of the forged carbon. Now, there's a couple of variations on here. So this section here, the paintbrush is too wet, and this side again a little bit too wet on the top. The lower section of this sample here is a bit more what we're looking for. So this does not have any clear coat on it yet, and I'm going to show you the method to try and replicate what you see here on the bottom, to try and get that look of forged carbon. And then after I show you on this new sample piece that I'll work on, then I'm going to show you about adding some color as well. So as I mentioned, this is a Novitec version of the Huracan Performante, and the German tuners Novitec and also Mansory. A lot of you guys probably have seen the outrageous cars by Mansory. Those two companies are using a lot of forged carbon now, and particularly Mansory putting color flex in the carbon, forged carbon as well. So we'll get into that and I'll show you that a little bit later. All right, so what you need basically is your parts painted in matte black. We're just going to use a sheet of paper just to daub out the paintbrush to make sure there's not too much paint in the paintbrush, and that's really all you need. Now what you want to do is you want to go light on the sample. You can always add more and more layers to get the effect, but if you go too heavy right at the start, it's going to end up no good. So let me just zoom the camera in slightly so we can get a bit of a closer look here. And what I do is I just basically put the paintbrush into the paint, and then I'll daub it out. I want the brush as dry as possible, so you're basically dry brushing the grey paint onto the black sample. Now, as I say, just move the paintbrush around because you can add more layers. So we don't want to concentrate on any one particular area. Obviously, parts on models are a lot smaller, unless you're doing a hood of a model, which is this size or bigger. But we just basically want to just daub it around everywhere. Now, the fact that the bristles are all bent and twisted really gives you that random pattern, and you can also use the edges of the bristle as well and just change the position of the paintbrush. So as you can see, I'm not applying too much here, just basically daubing it here and there. If I need a bit more paint on the brush, I'll just go back into that wet area on the paper, and then I'll blotch it out again, so there's not any real wet spots on there. And then I just continue to go over that, over the rest of the sample. Now it's worth practicing this method on some scrap pieces like this. This is just a little piece of laminate from a kitchen bench top that I use. Best to have a go and really experiment yourself and see what you can do with this method. Because as I say, there are maybe other methods. Someone might have a slight variation to this method, but this seems to work okay for me. So that covers most of the sample there with that first go. Now, while the brush is still dry, I can basically just smear some of this paint around, some of these daubs. And what I find is that makes the pattern a lot more random, because the paint, because this is enamel, it doesn't dry straight away like acrylic. So you can just basically smear some of this dabbed paint around on that sample. And you can just do a combination of the both. So you can keep dabbing and you can just sort of smear it around a little bit as well. So now you get the idea that it's looking quite random. I'll just dab the brush again in that paint there, and I'm just going to smear some random spots here and there. Now it really comes to life after you put the clear coat on the part. So as I say, this is why you want to try a few samples first. Have a bit of a play around, see what works, see what sort of a pattern you can get with the paintbrush, and that will give you a pretty good idea of the effect you want to go for and the look you're after as well. So let me see if we can see that. So it's very bright here in my workshop, so you can sort of see that some areas are a bit brighter than others. That's probably where the paintbrush was a little bit too wet, but the area sort of through the middle here is pretty good. We'll just try a bit more here, a little bit more paint. We'll try it up in this corner here. But yeah, if the paintbrush is too, you can add a little bit more. Just wiggle the paintbrush around a little bit. Just experiment. Just see what sort of effect you get. This I'm trying to smear the paint around a little bit more so it looks less like daubs. And that's sort of what your forged carbon looks like. Forged carbon is a really sort of, or that some people call it chopped carbon. It's a really random pattern in the weave because it's chopped up when it's put in the sheet. So there you can see up that end, I've smeared the paint around a little bit more in some areas. As I say, this is going to change a lot the way it looks when the clear coat goes on there. So that's why you want to practice and see what sort of a result you can get and see how it's going to go. So that's probably all I'm going to do on the sample for this point in time with the grey. So we're just going to let this dry a little bit. It's pretty dry now. Doesn't really smear because I'm dry brushing it, so this is not too bad at all. So as I mentioned, Mansory cars in Germany, they actually have some forged carbon with colours in it. So we'll try some colour. So maybe you want a forged carbon with some little red highlights in it. So then we can use some red enamel X7. Maybe you want to put a gold fleck in your forged carbon as well. So then we can use some Tamiya X12 for that. So I'll just wash this brush out and then we'll have a go at adding some colour in these sections. Okay, so that's dried thoroughly now. So there's a couple of areas on there that are a little bit different to my initial sample. That's why you need to basically have a play around and see what sort of effect you like to do. But let's try and add some colour now. So I'm just going to use some Tamiya X7 red, which is also an enamel, and we'll see if we can add some red flecks into the carbon as well, which should show up underneath the clear coat. So again, just apply the paint and then just daub out on a piece of paper, get most of the wetness out of that brush, and then we can just pretty much randomly add some red. Just get rid of that. So you don't want too much red or too much other colour. We just want to spread it around a little bit. We'll just do this side here, just so we can get a bit of an idea of what it looks like under the clear coat. I haven't done any red coloration or gold coloration in the forged carbon. I've only basically done the black carbon, forged carbon on the Huracan Performante Novitec version that I did on the rear wing and the body part. So this is just something else to try. So yeah, just a bit of red random in there, which is hard to tell now, but that should really pop when the clear coat goes on. And what I'll do, we'll try some gold as well. That's something that I've been wanting to do for a while. Let's try a little bit of gold fleck in there because that should show up nicely in the sun with a bit of coloration in there as well. So for the gold, I'm just using a Tamiya enamel as well. So this is an X12 enamel. The reason I use enamel is that it takes a little bit longer to dry, so it gives you a little bit more time to work. Acrylic dries too fast, and it's quite a lot thinner as well. So again, just going to daub out all the gold, or most of the gold, out of that brush until it's basically dry brush. And then we'll do it over this side and we'll put some gold in it as well. I think I've put a bit too much gold in there, but we'll play around a little bit and see what we can do. That's why it's a really good idea to just play around first with this method on some samples. Changes every day from when I did my original model there, because the way I do it changes. So we're just going to smudge some of that gold around, but that's basically going to give a bit of a gold fleck all inside the forged carbon look as well. So I've done red on this side, I've done gold on this side, and I've left this top part just the Tamiya XF66 light grey on top of the black. So what I'll do, I'll just go outside shortly when this dries. I'll put a couple of coats of Tamiya gloss over it and we'll come back and see what it looks like. Okay, so I've just sprayed some Tamiya clear over the top of this. This is just a Tamiya TS13 clear. I always put a 2K clear over the top of these, just because I never seem to get a super glossy or as anywhere near as good as a 2K clear with the Tamiya cans. This one is clear coated. This one had a bit too much grey paint added, but you get the idea of the process. Probably not the best versions I've done, but you need to have a play around and see what you can do. And now that it's got a bit of a gloss on it, it's even harder to film. This one was probably a little bit heavy with the red highlights in that section, but you get the idea of if you start with the grey and just do the basic forged carbon pattern in the Tamiya grey, and then you can go over with a little bit of colour as well. So just really hard trying to film this. There's a little bit of red in there, and this one actually came out pretty good with the amount of gold, so you can see some little gold flecks in there as well, but the grey blotches are a little bit heavy here as well. So it's just a matter of really just fine-tuning the method and seeing what works and what you're happy with. A good compromise between the grey and the black background, but I can assure you that with a bit of practice, you'll get the same sort of result that I did on my Huracan rear wing here. If I can try and capture the grey forged look. It's so hard to film this with the full gloss 2K over the top of it. Let me see if we can get that. Really hard to film this, sorry guys. But you will, oh, there you can see the rear wing a little bit better, the grey in there. So it's just a lot more subtle, and if you get the blotchiness about right, you will get that grey forged carbon look. There you can see it just slightly there. As I say, apologise, it's really hard to film this with the 2K gloss over the top of it, but you do get the idea of how it should look. Maybe that's a bit better angle there. You can see those side blades a little bit. But anyway, that is basically going to wrap up today's tutorial on how you can do forged carbon on your models. It does take a little bit of practice to get it exactly right, but when you get it right, I think it looks a lot more realistic than the deckled forged carbon that comes on the Auto Art or the MR models. So have a play around with it. Sorry that I couldn't completely capture what the effect looks like on this model, but I can assure you that if you have a bit of a play around, maybe that's a little bit better there. You can see on the side sill, the grey, it's a lot more subdued. So yeah, that's going to wrap up today's short tutorial on how to make your own version of forged carbon with a couple of paint colors. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments section below, and I'll keep working on some more tutorials for you guys. So thanks for tuning in. As I say, have a play around with it. I think my samples that I just did today are not the best samples for this tutorial, but definitely you can have a look at the custom model series of this model, and you should be able to see the carbon a lot clearer. So as I said, that's going to wrap up today's tutorial. Make sure you subscribed, make sure you smash that like button, and thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.